Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today we join Pandit Satish Kumar Sharma ji on the United Kingdom election results. Will this mean that Brexit will finally get passed? Will this also mean that there's going to be a more robust foreign policy on part of the United Kingdom government? Let's find out. Satish Kumar Sharma ji, welcome to PGurus channel.
Pranam Sri Iyer ji, and good evening and namaste to all of the PGurus watchers out there.
And Satish ji, even Donald Trump tweeted congratulations to Boris. And I think one of the headlines that I was expecting to see but did not see, maybe you can clarify, was there anything saying that Bojo got mojo?
Yes, there was. That was one of the tweets. There were many more colourful ones as well from people who support him, and even more colourful ones from people who seem to have a pathological hatred for the Conservative Party. So this has been an election where everybody has poured their creativity into social media. It's been extraordinary. Quite a strange election. One of the strangest elections that we've witnessed, including its outcome.
So viewers, when the dust has settled, the Conservatives have got 365 seats and a majority of 80, a very significant win. This gives Boris Johnson the legitimacy to pursue Brexit in the best manner possible for both sides. You want both sides to be happy at the end of the day. Now I'm also hearing that there could still be a customs union, because remember the famous Irish backstop. We'll talk about that in just a bit. But first, let's go and look at some of the constituencies that are of interest to us, starting with Leicester. How did things go at Leicester, Satish ji?
Yeah, Leicester is a very interesting one. If I recall, the desire to educate our community, the Indian Hindu community, the Sikh community here in the UK, was really what prompted our conversations. I remember us having a chat and then deciding that we needed to inform them. And Leicester was one of the key ones where we thought a lot of work could be done and should be done. And the Leicester constituency has proved to be worthy of interest. Let's have a look. So in Leicester, as you know, Keith Vaz, as I think he was referred to as Washing Machine Jim in one of the videos, he withdrew, and a lady was parachuted in, Claudia Webb, who was not from the domestic, the local political scene. She was very much part of the London Labour elite, Corbyn's very close inner circle. And so she was parachuted into a safe seat. And this caused a ruckus, and all sorts of declarations and ripples went through the community. So she won. She won with a majority of 6,000. Now, the Indian community, the local community, really got together once our video started to inform them as to what was going on in the background and how Labour had perhaps been taking the community for granted. So quite a few youngsters, and it's probably a good idea to do a shout out to Manoj and Leela and Vinod and one or two others who supported the Conservative candidate Bhupin. And they did amazing work. So this majority of 6,000 is actually reduced from a majority of 22,500 in 2017.
Thank you, Manoj, Vinod, Leela, and was one other name I missed.
Bhupinji was the candidate.
Bhupinji. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So in a 5-week period, they they rallied around and got their youngsters together, got a few social media wizards together, got printing done. They were supported by some good community stalwarts and started to talk to the community. And so the Conservatives increased vote share by 14%, and the Labour Party, their vote share dropped by 16%. Now, these are seismic shifts in a constituency that has been Labour for decades.
Were there any spoilers?
Not really. No, it was a very well managed and well handled election, shall we say?
What I meant by was, did the Lib Dem take away some votes?
Not particularly.
Okay.
There was a Lib Dem candidate, but even the fact that his surname was the same as the surname of the Conservative candidate didn't really make much of a difference there.
I see.
But the really encouraging thing is that the indication is that community in Leicester have now realised, enough of them have woken up to understand that this is a key part of British social life that we have to be engaged in. So
Right.
Leicester has really supported our own efforts and has stepped up to the mark. Coincidentally, some of the old school, the old guard who have been Labour councillors for decades and died in the war Labourites, 2 days before the election, 6 of the Indian Labour councillors stepped forward and produced a public letter to Jeremy Corbyn, effectively expressing discontent. Um, we were hoping and expecting that they might even have taken the next step and withdrawn their support and perhaps even left the Labour Party, but they chose not to do that. So the fact that they did make a statement, I suppose, will to some degree diminish the disappointment that the community had with them for not noticing that Labour were being very, very prejudicial to the interests of the Indian community locally. So
Ye-
yes, Leicester fulfilled its hopes, and I think we can take a little bit of credit for having started this tsunami at an early stage. So one flag for PGurus from Leicester.
Thank you. Thank you. And how did Mr. Virendra Sharma do from Southall?
Well, Southall is Southall. We were hoping for similar things, but
Yes.
Southall is strange. One, Southall doesn't have such a huge Gujarati community, and this leads us to an interesting question as to whether the impact is localized only on the Gujarati community. Southall has a very strong Punjabi community, and there the Labour Party had a drop of 9% in terms of their vote share, which is a big drop, and the Conservatives had an increase of 1.5%, which is pretty much the same as they did last time. But again, the important thing is that in Southall, the majority dropped by 6,000 votes. And that's a good achievement for the local campaigners there. But it is a very deeply entrenched Punjabi community there. The network of most of the councillors and the local community is Pakistani Punjabi as well. And Vrindaji is a Punjabi and a staunch Congress Labour supporter. So that little group, that tight network, seems to have weathered the shift that occurred seismically across the whole country.
I suppose instead of thinking Mano Englandi, Taino Englandi, they were thinking Mano Punjabi, Taino Punjabi. That is very, very fortunate.
Yeah, I think tribalism has still reared its head rather than focusing on the issues. In some pockets, we can see the evidence that that tribal ganging together is quite evident.
Let's take a look at your home constituency, Slough. How did Mr. Tanman Singh do?
Yeah, Slough is, it followed a similar sort of pattern to Southall. And I think we have a negligible Gujarati community in numbers. There's very, very few here. We have a strong Punjabi Hindu community and a Punjabi Sikh community, and obviously a Pakistani community who are also from the Punjabi sort of area. And so looking at their numbers, again, Labour managed to hold that seat.
What was the
Dhanmanjit, who
margin
had,
of victory? What was the margin of victory?
let's have a look. The vote share was down by 5.3% for Slough, and the majority diminished by 3,500. But it's still a significant majority. I think Tan's majority was his total vote share was 29,000.
Okay.
So it's a very, very big nut to crack. And
Well,
again, similar profile in terms of Southall. Punjabi candidate, Punjabi tribalism. It could well be that that's a profile worth having a look at. And it was quite an extraordinary campaign in some respects, as we have seen that there was the influence of the Khalistani group and the Tan's little appeal to them, claiming some sort of identifying similarities with Guru Tegh Bahadur and defending the Kashmiris and all that sort of
right.
nonsense that was portrayed. But there was also a little bit of mischief making in that there were attempts to connect the opposition to Dhanmanjit with the BJP in India. He was going around saying that he was being targeted, which was all obviously nonsense. But the creatives got together and produced a little video, which somehow drew a very tenuous connection between Gunwal, who was the candidate for the Conservatives, and the fact that me being one of her constituents, I signed her nomination form. And so some person who's obviously got far too much free time on their hands went through and dug up that I was a signatory, and then somehow seemed to have made some connection to BJP, and I have no relationships with the BJP or anything like that. and produced a little video which started to do the round. So mischief making was in full flow.
I can guess as to what song Mr. Tan is singing. Tan man dhan sab hai tera.
Well,
Well,
it was a an expected result. Um, the Conservative vote didn't really particularly increase in any way, shape, or form. They seem to have stayed at home. So I'm sure there'll be investigations as to what happened there. It was a slightly odd, unexpected result in some respects.
yes, indeed. And we also would like to touch base on a couple of other constituencies that
Okay.
we are going to cover. But before that, I just want to clarify again to the viewers. Satish ji is president of Virat Hindustan Sangam of United Kingdom, and he's apolitical. I'm apolitical. I'm responsible for Virat Hindustan Sangam California, and we are essentially followers of VHS, Virat Hindustan Sangam, whose goal is to educate and empower. We don't take any political sides. We have been often found criticizing the present government. We give credit where it's due. And believe me when I say this, if Bojo makes a mistake, you will hear it from us. So, so
No.
let's, yeah, go ahead. Please go ahead.
So far, Prime Minister Johnson, as he is now, has not made any mistakes, and it does seem as though the Swaminarayan Abhishek factor is holding up. The blessings that he received from the Swaminarayans do seem to have translated into a success.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
fingers crossed, and
Yeah.
we hope you'll continue in that vein,
Right.
and that Priti ji and obviously Sajid Javed and Alok Sharma, Rishi Sonak, who are all very close to the inner circle, continue to contribute using the best of dharmic principles.
Yes, indeed. Let's hope so. And Satishji, what happened in Walsall?
Oh yes, Valerie Vaz's seat. This was also one that we were quite
Yes.
interested in, and we tried to educate and exert some influence. Similarly, it was a Gujarati community there, predominantly Gujarati, who were in the Walsall seat. There was a young lady called Gurjeet Bains, Punjabi girl, who was standing as a challenger to Valerie Vaz. Now, ordinarily, these would have been seismic results. There was a Labour drop of 8% and a Conservative gain of 4%. Valerie's vote share dropped by the 8%, as I say, and her majority was only 3,456. So this now is a target seat. This becomes a marginal seat. And I think that credit goes to many of the youngsters there, Hitesh ji and Ashwin ji, Bhuvnesh, some of the local youngsters who understood the content of what we were trying to share with them, who did their own research and came to conclusions that actually they needed to be more proactively involved, put together a very small team in a short period of time, and have, as far as I'm concerned, they have reversed a trend with a majority of 3,400. This is definitely a vulnerable seat.
Absolutely. And let's hope that they will win, that Gurjeet ji wins the next time around. Let's move on to Brent North, where we have talked about Anjana Patel's candidacy. How did she do?
Yeah, well, despite the attempts to besmirch her good name by all those nonsensical allegations of Islamophobia and everything else, she actually did very well. The Labour vote share went down by 11%, and this is Barry Gardner's seat. Barry Gardner is a shadow front bencher in the opposition and a very seasoned politician of many, many years standing. Anjana managed to increase the Conservative vote by 3.6%. The majority from 16,000 is now down to 8,000. And
Wow.
that is a significant achievement on behalf of
Yeah.
Anjana ji. So yeah, she had lots of good support. She had a group of our young new activists. I remember that Saloni ji was there, and Nalini, and a shout out to Bhuvi ji as well, and the others who really stepped up to give lots and lots of support to Anjana. So I'm hoping that Anjana ji works hard and continues to work and challenges this, an 8,000 majority, bearing in mind that we are now facing a Labour Party which has been decimated across the country. They are a shadow of what they were. An 80-seat majority is a huge majority. So these seats are very, very much vulnerable. So yeah, well done to Anjana ji and Brent North.
And good job. And is this the first time she is contesting?
It is. She's a local councillor, and her story is a great profile, as we've talked about. She is a hardworking local person, her personality well known locally, and she's been doing great work for many, many years. And so it was quite right for her to step up and take a shot at Barry. And she has done remarkably well. Very, very pleased with her results. I'm sure everybody will be as well.
That's wonderful. Let's talk about Bob Blackman, an Indophile who
Okay.
has been, at the forefront of support from the Conservatives, expressing his strong, solid support for India and Narendra Modi. How did he do, Satishji?
Well, Bob did very well, or Bob Bhai, as he's called. In fact, when Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Johnson, made his keynote speech at the Swaminarayan Mandir, he referred to him as Bob Bhai because amongst the Gujarati community, he's often called Bob Bhai. And Bob Bhai fulfilled all expectations and probably exceeded them. Firstly, his majority has increased by 4 times. So his majority was it was a marginal, it was a target seat, and Labour had publicly announced their intention to focus a lot of effort on trying to unseat Bob. But his majority has increased by 4-fold. So it's a 5% increase in terms of vote share, and Labour's vote share plummeted by 8%, which is a significant shift in the community. Again, this was a Gujarati community, and so there is a trend beginning to appear that the Gujarati community has worked out how to engage and that it needs to engage. And sadly, our Punjabi community is still, I feel to some degree, stuck in Karan syndrome, so that blind loyalty, irrespective of what's right, what's wrong, and what's valuable for us. So
Well,
we have work to do.
Well, they're getting a big payoff, isn't it? I mean, Preeti Patel, of course, she's not from India, but she's Kenyan born, but Indian parentage, I guess. So
Yeah.
I can clearly see all the good Jews saying, "In good Jews we trust," and the trust has been repaid. I'm sorry to come up with these cliches, but just couldn't help myself. Now,
Well, it's a good time for cliches. So most of us were up until the early hours of the morning, and so we can drop our guard a little bit and enjoy humorous cliches. I am sure we'll be
yes.
forgiven for that.
And Scotland, the Scottish National Party had a huge surge. They won 13 extra seats. Now they're at 48. And how do you see Scotland's future? Is it going to be tied with United Kingdom, or are they going to have another referendum and try to decide that maybe we want to be part of EU and therefore we want separation? I mean, if something like that happens, would that be like very soon? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there were 2 things that happened which really influenced Scotland. One is Joe Swinson, who was the leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, with their extreme suggestion that they were going to erase all trace of the previous EU Brexit referendum and pretend it never happened. And if they were given a mandate, they would have just said, right, we're going to move forward and continue within Europe, which was it showed a blatant disregard for democratic process. And 17.4 million people would have been very, very upset to have their vote erased. And that reaction worked itself out into the voting patterns, and Jo Swinson lost her seat. Now, her seat was one of the Scottish seats, and so she was a Liberal Democrat from Scotland. And the videos of Sturgeon actually having an immense amount of pleasure seeing the result of Jo Swinson having lost her seat. They're all going over the internet and going viral. But I think to look at what's happening in Scotland, and also to look at the fact that the Northern Ireland situation has also become very tenuous in terms of reputation. The leader of the DUP lost his seat as well. So we have Northern Ireland and we have Scotland. And the democratic decision of the people seems to have moved both of those locations, those areas, those nations further away from the union of the United Kingdom. Now, this is, I think, to have a look at it, you have to step back a little bit further and look at it from a historical point of view. There are commentators who are saying that we are now witnessing a full reversal of everything that came out of the British Empire. And if you remember, Ireland was one of the first colonies colonized under with a great deal of violence. Scotland and Wales were also subdued by the English kings of old. And
who can forget Braveheart, the movie? Please continue.
Absolutely right, absolutely
Yeah.
right. And there's a movement here, isn't there? Now, the Scottish Nationalist Party have become very, very bullish about the fact that this now gives them the right to self-determination. And they are going to be lobbying for a referendum. And one of the statements that was made by their leader was that it's not a question of asking for permission from Westminster politicians. The right of the Scottish people to determine their own future is sacrosanct and can't be denied. And so this raises an interesting perspective. Perhaps what we need now is a group of MPs in the Indian Parliament to actually start to make declarations and pass motions supporting Scotland's right of self-determination and Northern Ireland's right of self-determination. And I think that would be quite educative, because then the population here would suddenly have a taste of how it must have felt like in India to have British politicians announcing in conferences, oh, we support the Kashmiri right of self-determination, etc., etc. So it's a very interesting time, a great deal of turmoil, a great deal of churn. I mean, the hope is that with the majority that Boris has managed to acquire, that stability will start to settle in now, because we've had 3.5, 4 years of incredible instability. And this is such a majority, it will permit the Conservative Party to actually enforce a period of stability. There is one other shift that I noticed, and I think this is probably quite a salutary and an important one, and that is prior to Boris's team taking over at the helm, there was that sentiment of having a variety of opinions around the table. You know, we want to reach out to the opposition and have them involved in the same discussions. And as anybody knows, when you have competitors sitting around the same table, a deadlock is usually what arises.
Yes.
Whereas when Boris came in with the whirlwind that sort of accompanied him, you know, he effectively removed 21 dissenting voices at just over a 24-hour period. And he has adopted the approach that if I'm going to achieve the objectives that we have laid out, I'm only really interested in having around me those people who can help me achieve those. Now, this is a management style. This is a way of conducting business and having your manifesto wishes executed. And it's a new one. It's a new one. It's a change from that mantra that is, we must all get on together, we want diverse views, etc., which hasn't really worked. So if this is a shift into that space of, well, we've got the mandate, here's clearly what we're going to do, we said we were going to do this, and now we're going to deliver it, and everybody else comes on board, otherwise we're going to push this through. Maybe this is the style of government that we're going to see. It may be more effective, but it also may be equally slightly more divisive. This is a new appearance on the scene that we're going to keep an eye on.
Now, let's take a look at one of the things that was mentioned, sort of like in passing. You said something about tribality of the Punjabis, and that existed across the borders of India and Pakistan. Now, I have had similar stuff being mentioned in the state of Kerala. They're the most educated, the most literate state in India, and yet they do what is called as crossvote. Now, a crossvote is where there are two coalitions, and they are at pains to make sure the third one doesn't get in, which is the BJP. So that is a kind of vote rigging that happens there. It's called cross voting. Did you see something like that in the recently concluded UK polls?
Well, other than the tribalism that I've mentioned,
right.
I think it was pretty much across the board. There is a slight difference in the way in which our Indian minority community responded to the challenges and the way in which the British community responded to the challenge. So you can see up and down the country, it was pretty much a unified voice which rejected Jeremy Corbyn's particular brand of socialism, right across the board. So it does seem to be that the British population, the indigenous population, actually looked at the values and the threats and made a choice on that basis. Whereas some of our Indian community, especially the Punjabis, they seem to have said, well, we're not too interested in those. We're going to actually ignore what the national trend is, and we're going to dig our heels in, and we're going to vote Labour irrespective of the wider trend and the wider movement. So that element of tribalism is there in that little group, but I've not seen any evidence of it elsewhere.
Wow. In conclusion, we wish the new government of Boris Johnson all the best. And we will be back and discussing more topics, because trust me when I say this has just begun. Britain is going to go through some tumultuous period, even with a stable government. That's just the beginning. And then when they start implementing stuff, you're going to see a lot of fur flying around. I saw, Satish ji, that Jeremy Corbyn has resigned as the president of Labour. Do you see any worthy candidates who can start the process of healing?
It's a wonderful question. If I can offer a minor correction, he hasn't actually resigned. What he's announced is that he is going to not contest nor lead the party in the next election.
I think I saw somewhere that he has resigned, but I could be wrong. Please continue.
Yeah, that was about an hour ago that I'd heard that this is the situation. But it's fast moving, and I've heard that there are pressures within the party saying, no, you need to leave immediately. We don't want you around for a long time. But that could be 4 years if he decides to dig his heels in. But you have to remember that he has a very staunch and quite in numbers, quite a large group of followers up and down the country who are personally committed to his well-being. So there's going to be a tussle within the Labour Party. Those who are observers, who perhaps students of these tumultuous times, many of them are saying that the Labour Party may well split into two, that there will be this extremist leftist sort of ideology, the John McDonnell group, and then there will be the more centrist and centre-left group. And the two of them can no longer coexist. It's like watching ferrets in a bag at the moment. There is a battle beginning to appear on the horizon. So there is a distinct possibility that he may lose the confidence of the party to a much greater degree, and he may well leave. But one of the interesting things that you mentioned with regard to these are challenging times and this is the beginning of a process, Brexit is going to take a bit of a while to implement. Yes. And at the same time, we're seeing a Europe in which economic performance is rapidly declining in many of the countries. There are huge issues with regard to the German economy. Redundancies in many of the major motor manufacturers have been announced. So Europe is not the same Europe with which negotiations commenced 3.5 years ago. And it's a different Europe. And even it's very possible that having received a significant majority, it may well be that Prime Minister Johnson goes back to the Europe of today, which is facing all of these pressures, and says, well, actually, we want to negotiate a different deal now. And he could do this from a position of strength, having received a mandate. It would send ripples through the establishment, but I don't think it'll send more ripples than getting rid of 21 people, including Winston Churchill's grandson and Ken Clarke, the father of the house, in one sweep. So who knows? Maybe this is a new Brexit. Maybe it's going to be the hard Brexit that was originally put forward by the Leave campaign. So it's all up in the air at the moment. A lot to look forward to.
So Satish ji, I have been hearing some murmurs, if you will, about some sort of a vote rigging having taken place in the recently concluded elections. Am I dreaming something, or is this just one of those fake narratives?
Well, I suspect there is no smoke without fire in this instance, shall we say. We were having a laugh at the count last night that India has a very comprehensive way of checking and ensuring that vote rigging doesn't take place. It's all electronic and it's collected very speedily. A massive country, 22 times the size of this tiny little island, huge population. And yet over here, we still have that cucumber sandwiches and village green sort of approach to having elections. So I went and voted, and nobody asked me who I was. I just said, this is my name, this is my address, and then they gave me a paper and I voted. Now,
you mean they didn't check your driver's license or some sort of ID?
Nothing whatsoever, nothing whatsoever. But I think this
Do they
has
mark
to be
your
done.
finger?
No, not at all, not at all. I could have walked in 6 or 7 hours later claiming to be somebody else, and with a new shift in place in that voting booth, I could have voted again in the name of somebody who perhaps I knew was on holiday, or perhaps was in hospital, or wasn't very well. There were reports of people who were turning up to vote, and then it was discovered that somebody had already voted in their name. So one thing I do think is going to be a really big plus is that with such a majority, Boris Johnson and the Conservatives will at last be able to introduce a proper voter ID system and a proper mechanism for ensuring that postal vote farming doesn't happen, because that's something that has been a bugbear in the electoral system here for many, many years. And if both of those can be ironed out, then we will have a very, very much more reliable way in which the electorate can actually indicate their choices. That would be a big step forward, and I'm genuinely hoping that will be implemented by this government.
And to add to that, Satish ji, what I would recommend the United Kingdom government do is to start using blockchain or distributed ledger technology as part of the electoral process. And here's how it benefits you. First off, weather can be inclement in England. Many people may not be able to get to the booths. If you do it using blockchain, then people can vote from the comfort of their homes. You can enable this feature right from your smartphone at home. And more importantly, you can change your vote any number of times up until the last vote. The last one you cast is your final vote. So this helps people. Oh, maybe I made a mistake here. Let me change my mind. So all these advantages are available. Plus, you can look at your record, how many times you changed your mind, and you can even have a comment field there. You can say every time you're changing your mind, well, I think this guy is because of this. So you have a way to make a very considered decision, and that sort of a process would allow the voting percentage to rise up to perhaps 80–90% even, and that would be good for the democracy.
That would be a really good thing to include, and I do know that Boris Johnson's team is surrounded by technocrats, people who are very much into use of technology. And if you think about the cost, we've now had 2 elections and a referendum, and now this one, 3 years, 5 years, just too much, and it's a huge burden on the exchequer as well. Right. So it could well be that that would help introduce security and ensure that vote rigging doesn't occur, but also it would dramatically diminish the costs of holding an election. Who knows? Who knows? Yes. There is something quaint, though, about gathering in a church hall at 4 a.m. in the morning and sort of little boxes of biscuits and mugs of coffee, trying to stay awake and doing counts. There's something peculiarly British about that, and it has its own charm, which you lose when you just go to an app on a phone and click something. Absolutely. So who knows? We shall see. But I'm sure that this Conservative government is going to bring in sweeping changes and will bring many aspects of British life into the 21st century. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do.
In the 80s, there was a football and baseball professional, and he would actually play both the games at the same time. So he would play the American football, that is, and then he would fly out and play a game of baseball. And Nike, I think, made full use of his multi-talented personality, and they used to come out with the tagline that said "Bo knows." So I'm wondering, what does the new Bo know? And hopefully it's not going to be any pro bono.
we shall see. It's not over by a long chalk yet.
Yes. And thank you very much, Satish Kumarji, for your views on the recently concluded UK elections. We look forward to having many more such scintillating discussions. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Pranam, Ayurji, and thank you very much for helping us to get the message out there and awakening our community, or at least the first stage of awakening our community. So thank you. We're indebted to you and to PGurus. Pranam.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. And a person as erudite as you being on our panel has really, really raised the bar. And I use our discussions as a reference point to tell all my other panelists, let's try and get to this level, and then let's start challenging Panditji and see where it takes us. Thank you very much.
You're far too kind. I look forward to it, though. Namaste.
Namaskar.